once again, for loop is just a while loop um, that's been a little streamlined. And so the thing to remember, in fact, here, watch. Let me just rewrite this as a while loop. The while loop just has one thing inside parentheses, that's the condition, so you put that there. Now, if I try to run this code, can you tell me what power error I get? No, just this while statement. It doesn't know what I is. So you have to define the variable. With while loop, you put the part that says what I equals, that has to go before the loop. And so that part goes before the while loop. This part goes inside the condition. Then you run all your code that you want to run, and then the increment would go at the end. And I told you yesterday, with while loop, you can put the increment wherever you want. But if it's like a for loop, it goes at the end. It's kind of the normal place to have that. Okay? So I'm just saying, that's the thing you have to remember is when all this stuff happens. People have more problems with for loops just because they forget those VJs. So I would label it again right now. This happens I'll put it this way. The initializing happens once at the beginning. At the beginning of the whole loop. Before the loop starts, really, I guess we would say. I'll make, be careful how I say it. And this one, the condition gets checked before you start every iteration of the loop, every time you go through the loop. And then the increment happens at the end or at the bottom of every iteration of the loop. You can abbreviate that if you want. Okay? And so like I said, get that straight and you should be okay because it's just like a while loop. Alright, let's run this one. This one you're just printing, so I'm not going to make a table. First thing printed is 1, obviously, and it's print line. So technically, here, let me show the output properly. You should be stacking these, not putting them in a row. And then it's going by 3, so the next number is 4, next number is 7, add 3, add 3. Now, when I check 13, the 13 got printed, and then the 13 becomes 16. But the 16 doesn't check out, right? And so the 16 should not be part of your output. And I just want to point out again that, like in this case, you're going to see, the last thing you'll see is the last thing that made this true, the last thing that was less than 15. But it was not the last value that the variable took on. So you don't have to print it, just be aware that did happen. All right. This one, you start out with 11, and you just go down by 2s, and you keep going as long as your number is greater than -2. So down, subtract 2, subtract 2, subtract 2, subtract 2, subtract 2, subtract 2, and you stop, and we're done. What is technically the last value that J took on? -3. -3 is the value that made the loop stop. But of course, you didn't see the -3 because the loop doesn't run for -3. All right, get the rest of this done. So, all right, listen. So on number 5, you don't have to make a table like this, but it helps, obviously, to make sure you get it right. Now, frankly, on a for loop, it's pretty straightforward because, like I said, this is how a normal while loop would also be, where the increment happens in the end. Actually, let me say this again. Look at this. Now, this is number 1 tweaked a little bit, but I would write down, if you didn't already do so, if nothing else, these 3 words: once, start, end, which that would be shorthand for what I have here. That the increment, the initialization, where you create the variable and give it an initial value. That happens just once before the loop starts, okay? And then the conditional is checked. It's like a while loop. A for loop is just a while loop that's compacted. So, basically it's running while this is true. And then the increment, once again, watch. The increment, you can put it right there. And you could actually write your code this way if you wanted to, but you shouldn't. It's supposed to be up there. But it's the same thing. It literally works the same way if you put it there. But I'm saying, that's what people always forget. They want to do this. They want to, like, increment it by 3 and then check it. No, it doesn't work that way. Once again, it's going to start with 20, and then keep going while I is less than 15, and then if it does run it, every time it does run the code, it'll increment after it runs the code. Okay? By the way, what will be the output of this code? If you start at 20 and keep going while I is less than 15, what happens? Nothing, right? And once again, this code compiles just fine, it runs just fine, it just does nothing. And so that's a possibility. When you have a quiz or a worksheet on the test, there can be problems in there that are like this, they don't run. All right. Once again, back to number 5. Like I said, just make sure you start correctly and end correctly. I obviously started with a 1, and so the 1 got tested, and then the 1 got added to the total, and it just keeps running. And so what I would do is jump ahead, and you want to figure out where it ends. And you have to go through this. So you're essentially adding all the numbers from 1 up to, and that's the question. What's the last number being added? And be careful. Really make sure you don't mess up, especially on the while loops that are abnormal. Take the last number you think is the answer, which is 14, plug it in there, and step through it. So yes, 14 makes it 2. Therefore, the 14 would be added. And then the increment happens after that, so S becomes 15. You go back to the top with S being 15, and obviously 15 makes it false, so the 15 does not get added, which means you just confirmed you're right. If you thought the 14 was the last number, that's part of your sum. And so I'm just saying that's all you're going to do, really, is sum up those numbers. And that's what 105 is. And here, once again, the 15 is in the table just because S did take on the value. You don't have to put 15 in your table, you just ignore it. But it was the value that made the loop stop. All right, let's look at the last problem. And let's just go through all these. You're supposed to really categorize all of them. Some of them work one way, some of the other. So this one starts with 0. And by the way, one little thing I have to mention. Like here, it has S++. That's called post increment. Here it has plus plus X. That's called pre-increment. And sometimes that matters, but here it doesn't. They both just make it go by 1. So don't worry about that. Okay. So this is going to go from 0 to 3, isn't it? Because 3 wouldn't get printed. 4 wouldn't get printed. And so A goes in this category. B is exactly the same as A. It's just everything got pulled out of the loop. And you can do this. It looks weird. The only difference between B and A is that X exists outside the loop. So if you want to print X later, you could. Whereas in A, if you try to print X, like if you try to come down here and print X after the loop, you couldn't. They run the same. And then we get to C. X starts at 0 again, but then it becomes 1 before it gets printed, right? Yes. And so this one obviously is going to be in the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 1, 2, 3, 4 category. Just for the record, this is what I was saying before. Be careful on the ending point, right? So if this was not multiple choice, or in other words, if you didn't already know the answers for either 0, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, you could just write in your answer. A common wrong answer would be that. People say, okay, it starts with 1, I got that. And they just assume, well, it says keep going as long as X is less than 4, so the last number printed must be 3. And they're wrong. The last number that makes this condition true is 3, of course. But then right there, the 3 becomes a 4, and the 4 gets printed, and then the loop ends. So that's what I'm saying. Be careful of these things, okay? The next one. Which way is it going to go? It's going to start with 0 or 1? On D, it's going to start with 1 because it's just like C. It's structured a little differently. In fact, once again, C and D are the exact same thing, except for one's written as a for loop, one's written as a while loop. By the way, I have to say this. Why you can write for loops like C is written, I don't want to see it. Because if you're going to do it that way, write as a while loop.
What's the difference?
This looks better, and your code should look better. And I'm serious about that. So B and C, I don't want to see code written that way. The fact is, you can write a for loop with nothing in there. It's possible, but I will not give you full credit for that if you do. Okay, so don't do that. Right. What about the next one? Does E start with? Okay, E starts with 1. Obviously, it's kind of obvious. It says right there, so it goes under that category. And then the last one is starts with 0 because that's normal. All right, that's that. I need someone to come up here and rewrite F as a for loop.
Just change while to for.
And a normal for loop where everything's inside the loop.
Oh, it's easy.
Well, come here.
Wait, can I just sit down? No. It's the same.
Your arm is not long enough. Come here. Stand up. Stand up.
I like this going on.
And then go ahead and put the code that goes inside the loop. Indent though, please.
That's doing.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Good. Very good. Now, one last question. Those with F and what characters wrote works exactly the same way, same output. There's one subtle difference in this. What's the difference? Where the variable x was created. In the while loop, you don't have a choice. You create the variable before you start the loop. Okay? So, because, once again, because x is created before the loop here, you can come down here and print x and you would see. Just for the record, if you print x here, what would you see as a value? After the loop ends. Before. Once again, the loop is going to go through the values 0, 1, 2, 3, and print those values because those make it true. But 4 would be what ends the loop. If you print x after loop, you get 4. Whereas here, I'm saying, if you said print x here, it won't even compile because x only exists inside the loop. You're outside of the scope at that point. And so I'm just saying, keep that in mind. Sometimes you want to have to use that variable after loop ends. And so that you'll get that error if you try to do that. All right. Good job. We're done.